I wanted to talk to you quickly about your panel tomorrow. It's on California Socialism. And before the election, you released a book and you talked about how America had two choices. Democrats have been in charge in Washington now for a little over a month. Where do you see things?
Well, in Countdown to Socialism, the book I wrote about, part of it was a warning because people said, well, this really can't happen. And I said, look, this really can happen because I've watched it my whole life. We're essentially the birthplace for this modern socialist movement. When I was just a young kid, is when the first radicalization occurred, where it went from, the Democrats went from being kind of a labor party to this radical party. It started in the 60s and 70s, and then in the 80s when I was a kid, it was this radical, in the name of the environment, became a radical green movement. And we were used, in my area, the agricultural area of California, we were used as the guinea pigs where they would come in and they would build these narratives that, oh, we're just trying to save these little creatures from these evil corporate people that are cutting down these trees and that's causing fires, and then we got to cut off this water, we got to make sure we send this water out to the ocean to save all these beautiful fish. And there was no truth to any of it. It was all fake news. And so and you would always wonder, like, how can people think this is okay to let hundreds of thousands of acres lie fallow? And it's what drove me into politics. So part of what I was trying to warn about was that we're in a much different place now because we had a few advantages. Obviously, been in the news recently because of Rush Limbaugh passing, but one of the things that happened, what Rush Limbaugh created, was he kind of took over AM radio and it went global, and everybody tuned in because they're like, wow, I'm hearing things I haven't heard before, and I'm not hearing these things on the news. And so he was kind of there before the creation of the web. And then if you look at it in 2016, Donald Trump really utilized social media, especially Facebook, in order to get elected, because he was able to get above and beyond the traditional legacy fake news media complex, and he was able to get his information out and reach his voters through things like Facebook Live. And then, of course, right after that, the crackdown occurred and it began. People think that Donald Trump made up the term fake news. It wasn't. It was Zuckerberg and Obama are the first ones that I could find that actually made up the term fake news. So then Google and the other oligarchs all got in and they said, okay, we're going to censor places like Breitbart. We're going to make sure we can't find, and everything gets pushed to the bottom if you're part of that less than 5% of the content creators and news that are out there, like you guys, that are either center to center right. They're essentially isolated you there, and then once you run it through what's called the disinformation funnel, and it runs through there, it becomes 99.9% of the content that's being created is left wing, hard left wing, and so it's tough to reach that next generation.
Like, right, they largely control the narrative.
Right, they build the narrative, they promote the narrative, and so you end up people that just want to be out there doing their thing and taking their kids to soccer practice or what have you. They're just deluged on their devices with all this garbage, and they don't ever get to see what real investigative work is, like what Breitbart tries to do, what Project Veritas tries to do in terms of holding these people accountable. So they went far and beyond where I ever thought they would go. I knew that they would shadow ban people on these sites, but I never knew that they would actually eliminate a company from a platform. Apple had so far had stayed out of this fight, but now they eliminated a company, essentially. They destroyed them, and Amazon. So there's nothing that these oligarchs won't do now. So we're really in a situation, it's much like California, but much bigger, where you have a Politburo type system, where you have people who don't even have to run for office, like Biden, who just hid in his basement. Harris couldn't even win a primary. She couldn't even get 10th place in a primary. So she had to drop out. So you have these apparatchiks now that are running the party, and there's a lot of similarities, I think, between kind of some of the old Soviet dictators that came in there, where they were just kind of propped up, and you see that where Biden maybe makes talks to people a couple times a week. He's not even going to do a State of the Union speech.
Right. So you mentioned Rush Limbaugh, who was essentially the uncancelable. He couldn't be canceled. They couldn't do it.
They tried, though.
They tried. So moving forward, how can conservatives continue to fight this up to the next election?
Well, the fight is right now. So you cannot win a battle for ideas if you have no communications architecture. Right now, we're relegated to the ghetto, right? So on the internet, so for example, like what I have to have on my, I have to have favorites now, and I have to go directly to Breitbart in order to get the news, because I know I'm not going to see it.
That's the case for a lot of people, yes.
On any of the social media sites. Pretty soon, I'm sure apps are going to get canceled and everything else. So that's not going to work. That you can't win a battle for ideas if you have no way to really communicate with one another and promote your ideas out there to the public. So luckily, YouTube has a replacement now. Rumble is doing a very good job. Almost all the conservative creators have went to Rumble, and not because Rumble's a conservative company, but basically Rumble's just guaranteeing that they have their rules in place and they're not going to censor. They're not going to censor you, and it's a place where if you go to Rumble, you type in my name, you'll find my little videos that I like to do. You won't find that on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and find it, you'll see all this garbage and defamation that's out there on me. So what people have to do now is they have to make sure that that their representatives know that this is the most important issue, is to rein in these tech oligarchs and for us to get a social media platform out there where we can communicate our ideas, or it's going to be really tough to win in the future. And then secondly, at the state level, it's not just the federal level, it's also the state level. And we heard Governor DeSantis here in Florida say it, that if any of these big tech oligarchs censor, they're going to pass legislation where they're going to fine by the day if they eliminate political people from their state. So that's going to be interesting to watch, and hopefully other states will replicate that, because look, you're not going to rein these guys in. These guys are bigger, these big tech companies are bigger than most countries.
I just wanted to switch gears to Biden and China. Are you concerned by Biden's actions with the Chinese Communist Party? Well,
first of all, there's the email that's sitting out there of the big guy. So that never got figured out, right? That was censored. We're just talking about censorship. So you have the New York Post story that broke on Hunter Biden's laptop. That all got brushed under the rug. Raises other questions about what the FBI knew and when they knew it. But largely, that got deep six during the election, so nobody even knew this happened. Well, the facts are still out there. He has not answered for what was he actually going to get? What did his son get from the Chinese government? But the Chinese are very, very good. They're very, very smart. And Xi Jinping is, he's a very clever guy. If you notice, his opposition's disappeared in the last decade. Like completely gone. So they know what Biden's all about. Xi Jinping saw characters like Biden. He's very familiar with it. He saw it in the old Soviet Union, like I was just describing. Right. He saw it in his own country. So he knows that Biden he's just a character. He's a facade.
Would you say, do you consider?
He's really an avatar, I think is the word I'm looking for. He's an avatar. So they're very used to this. So they're not going to, they know exactly how to manipulate these people.
So would you say that Biden is compromised by the Chinese Communist Party?
I don't know, he's really he doesn't have to be compromised, because they know he's a joke. They know that he doesn't know what he's doing. They know that he didn't have to run a serious campaign, and they understand what's happened here in the United States. As a matter of fact, they like this. They like having a Politburo style system here in the US because over there, they know in China, they know that they have to put in economic programs that work. They have to get people jobs and money. Here, the left here, their policies don't work because they're built off of this, identity politics. And when they're sitting around worried about whether or not we're going to allow people who were born as a male, if they can now participate in high school girls' sports.
Women's sports, right.
So the Chinese are looking at this, laughing every single day. They see the Capitol surrounded by double fencing with razor wire. China loves this. They don't have to compromise. They love having the Democrats in control.
Right. And then my final question, Biden in the first few weeks in office, he signed dozens of executive orders, some on immigration. Do you view his actions on immigration as increasing the threats of national security, compromising our national security?
Well, the challenge with it is that you stop. the Congress funded building the wall. The wall was working. The wall, needs to get completed because you have a huge challenge in this country of how are you going to deal with all the people that are here not breaking the laws. Well, the only way you get the American people to a position of wanting to solve the overall immigration problem, which is exactly what President Trump was trying to do, was border security. Then you deal with a process by which people can come into this country. When you have jobs available, that's common sense. We used to have programs like that work. Other countries have those programs. But what they're doing is they're welcoming just, everybody come on through the gates. And the challenge with that is, under the gates or around the gates, really. The problem with that is there's been, growing challenges that and information of, it's not just like the poor guy that's from, Central America that's trying to come up to get a job, to feed his family. There's other bad actors that are coming from the Middle East and all over the globe that are going into Central and South America, and they're coming up and getting into the United States.
And that's the narrative that doesn't seem to get as much press.
Right. They're in small numbers, but they're likely very, very dangerous over time. And so when you have these huge caravans of people coming up, and you have people that are sneaking in with those that are going to come up and join other crime syndicates, it's a problem.